1580. It's a Freedmen Friday, and it is a significant week. It's the World Cup. I'm wearing my Ghana shirt not just because I'm rooting for everybody black, but because for the first time in history, a French president has said the word reparations. He said it repeatedly. I'm talking about Macron, President Macron there, when talking about Africa, and he was also speaking on Haiti and the issue of reparations, of course, getting into the world conversation once again because of the actions of Ghana and other countries, lots of other countries around the world who voted in the UN to state that the triangular slave trade was the gravest crime against humanity. And in support of reparations, there is an international summit on reparations this month in Ghana. And some analysts feel like the French president was trying to get ahead of the conversation. Will France pay back Haiti for the money they extracted for their supposed property, the reparations that were paid to slave owners in France by the nation of Haiti, which is one of the reasons why they are always struggling financially. A judge in San Francisco, Judge Joseph Quinn, ruled that a lawsuit challenging the reparations fund in that city is premature. And said there was not sufficient evidence for that challenge to proceed. And so that's another win for reparations. The French president saying France has to address the issue. Maybe him trying to shape the conversation, but it is certainly an acknowledgement that this is no longer a fringe issue and is something he is going to have to address, whether he takes the narrative by the horns and shapes that talking point, or whether he is overcome by the African American, and reparations movement worldwide. The mayor of Chicago is saying that he plans to tap into the Vatican and get the Pope's help for his reparations effort after the Vatican apologized for their role in our enslavement. There is a lot of movement going on in the reparations space. I was sad to see that both Tom Steyer and Butch Ware, the two gubernatorial candidates here in California who said that they were unequivocally for reparations, went down to defeat. Puzzlingly, some reparations activists did not support either of those candidates, but the fact that we had two that were willing to say out of their mouths in the middle of a campaign, yes, I support reparations, well, that represents major progress. I was looking to have a conversation about how reparations fared in this election. Perhaps we'll put a pin in it for next week, because I wasn't able to find anyone bold enough to engage in that conversation with me, at least not yet. So we are going to play what I consider a classic conversation. We need more understanding of the basics of reparations in order to be the messengers, the ambassadors, the teachers, and the advocates for this issue. And in service of that, one of the world's leading economists joined me, Dr. Sandy Darity, William Sandy Darity, to talk the basics of reparations. We'll recap that conversation now, only on KBLA Talk 1580. Dr. William Darity Jr., welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Just one proviso. I am no longer the director of the Samuel Du Bois Cook Center at Duke, and I'm actually in the transition of making, hopefully, a move to Howard University.
Wow, that's amazing. Do you want to say why, or is it just something a natural professional transition?
Well, I've been at Duke for 25 years, and I've decided that it's time to retire from Duke, but I don't want to stop being engaged in research and advocacy. So Howard University appears to be offering me a wonderful opportunity to make a transition to working there.
Amazing. Well, thanks for that update. So we've been doing this Freedmen Friday conversation for almost 2 years, a little every Friday, just trying to get ourselves up to date on on the topic, the momentum, progress. And so it's great to have you on, but I almost don't know where to start. So I'm going to start with the thing that people most often associate with your scholarship, which is talking about the racial wealth gap and why that matters in terms of reparations, why it matters in terms of the conversation about cut the check.
Sure. Where would you like me to start? Would you like me to talk about the size of the gap initially?
Well, yeah, let's talk about the size of the gap and why that even is related to reparations.
Okay. So the size of the gap, based upon the most recent data we have from the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, indicates that the average black household has $1.15 million less in net worth or wealth than the average white family. This is a stunning differential. It has been growing over time, particularly accelerating as a gap from the 1950s to the present. So approximately 75 years or so, we've had a continued explosion in the difference between black and white wealth. Wealth is so closely tied to so many aspects of well-being, including health, which is the emphasis of the article that we just had come out in Nature and Human Behavior, and in particular the health of children. It also is a mechanism for households or families to buy their way into high amenity neighborhoods, to provide quality schooling for their children. If you're not satisfied with your neighborhood school and you're extremely wealthy or moderately wealthy, you will have the capacity to purchase private schooling for your kid. You can have your kid come out of college without holding any student debt. If there's an issue with the criminal legal system, you can purchase quality legal counsel to cope with it if you have sufficient wealth. In addition, it permits you with the opportunity to purchase or sustain a business. And in addition, let me mention that if you're wealthy, you can transfer the resources to your children and grandchildren, either after you die in the form of an inheritance or while you're still living in the form of a variety of gifts.
So when those of us who are not economists hear that the average white family or the average black family has 1.15 million less in wealth, it makes it sound like the average white family are millionaires, and that certainly can't be true.
No, but 25% of white families have a net worth in excess of $1 million.
Really?
And that's true for only, yes, 25%, 1 out of 4. And that's true for only 4% of black families. So let's not be deceived by the idea that this wealth gap is driven by a handful of extraordinarily rich white billionaires.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there is a handful of extraordinarily rich white billionaires, but that's not the reason that average gap is so wide.
And so when we see it, very poor white people, which we have in this country, they're still part of a system where 25% have a net worth of $1 million.
So if you were to compare, the answer to your question is yes. If you were to compare whites in the lowest income quintile, the bottom 20% of income recipients, they still have substantially more wealth than black households who are in the same quintile. Black households in that bottom quintile have a median level of wealth somewhere in the vicinity of $0 to $100, while white households in that lowest quintile have a level of wealth closer to $12,000 to $15,000.
Wow!
So at all strata of the income distribution, there is a a marked difference in the amount of wealth that households hold by race.
And I've heard you address the sort of stereotype that that's because we're lazy, cursed, or whatever the reasons people give, that is not tied to.
Well, we might be cursed.
I will not sign off on that, Dr. Darity. I will not sign off on curse. But I mean, basically, lazy is the narrative. The reason it has nothing to do with Jim Crow or enslavement or subsequent harms. It has to do with the fact that we don't work hard enough or we don't save.
Yeah, well, as I just pointed out, if you look at any income quintile, there's a sharp difference in wealth between blacks and whites. So if we're working hard enough to generate those levels of earnings and income, but we still don't have the same level of wealth, I think that puts a lie to that claim. I'd also like to add that there is, once you control for income, there is no significant difference between black and white household savings rates. And in fact, in some income quintiles, the black savings rate is actually higher. And then furthermore, if you are to look at educational attainment, for many years we had a situation in which white heads of households who had never finished high school had a higher level of wealth than black heads of households who had earned college degrees. That is no longer true in the 2022 data, but black heads of households still have less wealth than white heads of households. Black heads of households with college degrees still have less wealth than white heads of households who had finished high school but not gone any further. So, if you want to argue that people aren't working hard in the process of trying to attain greater educational achievements, maybe that's a position you could take. But to me, that process of getting more and more education is an indication of effort and motivation. And so that doesn't have a payoff in terms of closing the racial wealth gap.
So when you lay it out like that and we see this giant, massive cavern of a wealth gap, why is reparation the way to close that? How do you directly make that connection?
So the argument that I would make is that the wealth gap between blacks and whites is the best indicator of the cumulative intergenerational effects of white supremacy in the United States. And so if we are concerned about the status of individuals who are living now, not merely the status of our ancestors who were subjected to brutal enslavement, if we're concerned about the status of people living now, we need some kind of measure to calculate the size of reparations that captures the penalties that they are incurring in the present moment. And I'm absolutely convinced that the wealth gap is an excellent measure of that kind of penalty that's being faced by living black Americans whose ancestors were enslaved in the United States.
William Darity Jr. is my guest. He's author of, among other things, From Here to Equality, Reparations for Black Americans in the 21st Century. We'll continue our conversation when we come forward. It's a Freedmen Friday on KBLA Talk 1580.
She's reclaiming her time on KBLA Talk 1580. More First Things First with Dominic DePrima when we come forward.
Y'all did it!
Loving each other, needing each other. Hey, Los Angeles. KBLA Talk 1580 is turning 5, and we're celebrating in a big way.
Oh my God!
Join us Friday, June 19th, Juneteenth, 4 to 7 p.m. at the Beehive for our 5th anniversary bash and Juneteenth celebration. We're talking surprise celebrity guests, a special presentation, and a major announcement you will not want to miss.
I can't wait to hear it.
Plus, live music, dancing, games, and enough food and drink to keep the party going.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Of course, you're welcome to bring your own picnic basket, blanket, and lawn chair. And the best part, it's completely free. But here's the thing. You've got to sign up in advance. Space is limited, so don't wait. Head to KBLA1580.com right now and lock in your spot. Friday, June 19th, The Beehive, KBLA Talk 1580. 5 years strong, and we're just getting started.
Happy anniversary, KBLA!
Yeah, man. Stand up!
When the story gets twisted, who's going to tell the truth? When they cut the microphones, who's still talking? When history gets rewritten, who remembers what really happened? We do. KBLA Talk 1580. Black media isn't just important right now, it's essential. Because when mainstream outlets move on, we stay. When the headlines ignore our communities, we don't. When decisions are being made that affect black lives in our schools, our neighborhoods, our economy, KBLA is in the room. This is more than radio. This is a lifeline, a record, a rallying cry. Black stories, black voices, black power.
The heat is on.
On the air and in the culture. KBLA Talk 1580. Stay connected. Stay informed. Stay loud.
Stand up!
Continues right now with Dominic DePrima on First Things First.
We're talking with Dr. William Darity Jr., and we're talking reparations because it's Freedmen Friday. We're discussing the wealth gap and how it ties to reparations. And the reason that I said that I wanted you to also speak on why you have emphasized the importance of cash reparations or monetary reparations is because we constantly hear, well, like the governor of California said after the release of the task force study, reparations is not just about a check. But when you talk about a wealth gap, that has to be part of it, right? That has to be a priority, does it not?
Yes, absolutely. And let me add, when people say reparations needs to be more than a check, let's cut the check and see what's still needed.
Yeah, that's a great formula.
Yeah. Also, I would like to add that it's important to go back to some of the atrocities that you referred to earlier to explain why the wealth gap exists. And I think we have to start with the period in the immediate aftermath of slavery when the freedmen were promised 40-acre land grants as restitution for their years of bondage. And it was a promise that was not kept. But at the same time, the federal government gave 160-acre land grants to 1.5 million white families in the western territories of the United States as they completed their colonial settler project. And that's the beginning of the post-slavery racial wealth gap, the provision of substantial tracts of lands to white Americans and the denial of the freedmen of access to any form of restitution after their years of slavery. The consequence is that was the beginning of the inability of black families to transfer significant resources across generations, while white families were given, through government policy, a foundation for substantial ability to transfer resources across generations. And so that's the fundamental case for the use of the racial wealth gap as the basis for the size of the reparations payments.
Yeah, and I note that you also point out in your book how once they move from giving out land to helping people get houses, the same pattern continues.
That's right.
So when you calculate, there's always, oh, it's too expensive, it's too massive. But you look at specific ways that we would break down what is owed, and you've been very clear that you feel it should be on a federal level.
Yes, if we add up the total that would be due based upon the $1.15 million household or family gap, then that comes to approximately $400,000 per eligible recipient. There are about 40 million Black Americans whose ancestors were enslaved in the United States, out of a total of about 47 million black people in the United States. So if you multiply 40 million times $400,000, that gives you a figure of $16 trillion. The combined budgets of all states and localities in the United States, so some 100,000 of them, is less than $5 trillion.
Wow.
So it's only the federal government that has the capacity to meet that bill, because unlike the states and localities, the federal government is not constrained in its spending by its tax revenue, because it's a sovereign issuer of currency. States and localities don't have their own currencies, and so the federal government really has no constraint on its spending except for the danger of inducing significant inflation. And in Kirsten Mullins and my book, From Here to Equality, in the final chapter, we talk about ways in which the spending can be conducted to mitigate the inflation danger. And so we're absolutely convinced that if you want to close the racial wealth gap through a scheme of direct payments to eligible recipients, the only way to do it is to have the federal government be the responsible spender.
And it sounds like, from what I was reading in your book, that you think that state and local and corporate and other institutional reparations programs could undermine a federal reparations initiative?
To the extent that they bear the label of reparations, when I so closely identify reparations with elimination of the racial wealth gap, we could end up in a situation where, even if we had a Congress that was receptive to comprehensive reparations, they would get told that, well, reparations has already been done in all of these communities around the United States and in several of the states around the country, so that there's no reason to do it. Even though, as a collective, those states and localities do not have the ability to close the racial wealth gap.
So does that mean that an Evanston or a California is potentially can create an obstacle to a federal manifestation of cut the check?
It certainly could, and I wish that they would call these programs or projects something else besides reparations.
Really?
I don't object to these kinds of projects. They can be beneficial, but they do not have the quality and character of a true reparations plan. So maybe they could call these racial equity initiatives. But I wish that the term reparations was not attached to these types of projects.
And what about the studies? I mean, the California Task Force has done a study that some suggest could be a replacement for H.R. 40, and that we could use that data to create a national kind of program.
Oh, absolutely, especially the first half of that study, which is primarily a review of the historical atrocities that form the basis for a reparations claim. And that first half of the California report is not limited to California. It's actually a scan of the national history of racism. And so, yes, I mean, that could be essential in creating support for the national case. I would also add that New Jersey has a report that was done privately that also has valuable content that could go towards supporting the national case for reparations.
So does that mean H.R. 40 is obsolete?
I would say that there could be a legitimate basis for saying that it's important to have a commission in place that generates a report, and it could be a report that's based upon what's in the California report and what's in the New Jersey report, but generates a report that is brought before Congress with a set of recommendations for a comprehensive reparations plan. Unfortunately, H.R. 40 is not designed in such a way that it would produce a commission that would generate a report with the suitable characteristics. There are also some structural flaws with H.R. 40. It's not a particularly good piece of legislation. So I think if we were going to go in the direction of having a commission, a congressional commission, that was a prelude to a reparations plan, we would need a new piece of legislation for that commission.
So, okay, we only have a minute right here to news, traffic, and sports, but I'm interested, what is the next step? What is the way forward? If H.R. 40 is not sufficient, and we already have these studies from New Jersey and California that could be used as a basis for real reparations, what would the next step be?
I think that the next step must be the development of a national movement to support reparations and to make use of the materials that are already at hand to build that case. But we need some type of organizational momentum to put pressure on Congress through lobbying and petitioning, even in an environment where we won't necessarily be very optimistic about the congressional response, but we've got to begin that process, and we have to elect a different breed of individuals to serve in Congress, to have an opportunity to have genuine restitution.
I think we're going to have to do that for more than just reparations. We're talking with Dr. William Darity Jr. I'm Dominique DePrima, and this right here is KBLA Talk 1580.
A safe place to go loud. A great place for progressive politics. KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Bree Wood with BIN News Now. The opening of the Gordie Howe International Bridge has been delayed. Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan says the Detroit to Windsor span won't open as planned with no official reason given.
Michigan is ready to move forward, and we're hoping that we can do that in the next few days or week.
Reports suggest the delay may involve the Trump administration. A black woman in Alabama has been sentenced to life in prison in a fatal shooting. Prosecutors say Anaya Noden was convicted of killing another pregnant black woman, Justina Wallace, during a dispute in 2023. Wallace's unborn child also died, and the case involved a conflict between the two women who were pregnant by the same man. And nearly 1 in 3 Americans are avoiding checking their bank balances due to anxiety, according to a new survey by U.S. Bank. The study found younger adults, especially Gen Z, report the highest levels of financial stress. Get BIN News Now, on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
Escape the city at the all-new Hard Rock Casino Tejon, just an easy drive from downtown LA. Play your favorites across over 2,000 slot machines, plus baccarat, blackjack, roulette, and craps. Enjoy live entertainment and exceptional dining. Must be 21 or older. Concerned about your gambling? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The first World Cup soccer match in the U.S. is tonight at SoFi Stadium in Inglewood. The U.S. takes on Paraguay. Start time 6 p.m. If the ticket prices are out of your budget, you can catch the match live on Fox Sports Peacock, or Telemundo. Get ready for a lot of soccer chatter over the next several weeks. The World Cup will last 39 days. 48 nations will compete in 16 cities across the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. Serena Williams was unable to compete in the doubles quarterfinals Thursday in the HSBC Championships in London. Serena's doubles partner, Victoria Mboko, was forced to withdraw because of a knee injury. Serena and Mboko won their first round match on Tuesday. Serena says she still intends to play in Germany next week at the Berlin Open. No word yet on whether the Compton native is doing the singles or doubles. Serena is considering a comeback after retiring in 2022. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Don't be anxious or confused about AI. Take control of your career when you get the skills to tackle real business problems and design specialized solutions. HR Dive reported that entry-level talent with applied AI credentials can receive up to a 25% salary boost. But where do you find training that you can trust? Future-proof your career and deliver more value with Humans Lead the Way AI. Their hybrid learning courses use practical definitions, real-world examples, and strategic insights to help you and your team understand AI with confidence. No magic, no hacks, no shortcuts. Just practical knowledge that helps you use AI more successfully. Don't wait. AI can never replace people who know how to use it well. Register for courses today at humansleadtheway.com. That's humansleadtheway.com.
1580.
And we're doing our Freedmen Friday thing. We do that every Friday at this time. We're talking with William A. Darity Jr., who is making a move to Howard. That's amazing. He's an author and a scholar, an economist, and much, much more. Dr. Darity, when you talk about so many of the specifics of a reparations plan or program are laid out in your book. How to mitigate inflation, how to deal with the arguments against it, how to calculate the dollar amounts, how to figure out who's eligible. I mean, you go in detail about a lot of this stuff that people are saying are the reasons why reparations are impossible or a fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the central motivations for us doing the book. One of our colleagues, Alfred Brophy, a law professor, had written some 15 years ago, something that is often missing from reparations talk is a specific plan for repairing past tragedies. And Kirsten Mullen and I were convinced that it's important to provide a specific plan so that people cannot make the claim that something that is morally right can't be done because we don't know how to do it.
Yeah. And we've given reparations, as Molly Bell points out in the chat, to lots of other people and groups, including groups that for which the United States has no direct culpability in the harm.
That's right. That would include the payments that were made to the families that lost loved ones in the course of the 9/11 attacks. That would include payments that the U.S. government is making to victims of the Holocaust. That would include payments that are being made to the folks who were held hostage in Iran. And that's a particularly striking example because those individuals are being paid $10,000 per day of captivity, which comes to a total of approximately $4.4 million per person.
Wow. That is a great example. When you speak on inflation, and this is one of the things, well, this would throw our economy, into chaos, and/or I did not, from some white folks, I didn't hold slaves, or from some immigrants, I wasn't even here. Why should I be paying for your reparations? I love that you address these two things in the book specifically.
Yeah, and I think that one of the most important things for people to consider is that we have created a problem by frequently using the phrase slavery reparations, because from our perspective, the reason for reparations is to correct the disadvantages that have been imposed across the generations on the living descendants of the persons who were enslaved. We are not in a position to provide restitution for our ancestors, which would probably be amounts of money that would be magnitudes greater than the $16 trillion figure. But we are not in a position to compensate them. They are no longer here. But the consequences of their enslavement and the policies that the U.S. government pursued after slavery ended are consequences that are held by the living descendants. And that's the basis for compensation.
Yeah, it's so well said. And I love that you call out the term taxpayer dollars.
Oh, yeah. That's a phrase I hate. Yeah. Federal spending is not tied to taxpayer dollars, not in the same way that state and local spending is.
I've had a lot of people push back on me, Dr. Darity, when I say it's a debt. It's not charity, it's not welfare, it's a debt. And the pushback comes from the fact that, at least sometimes, that they feel the 40 acres or 40 acres and a mule was not a contract, it was a promise, or that it was not ever meant to be applied to all veterans of enslavement or their, people impacted by this institution in this country.
So the initial commitment was embodied in General Sherman's Special Field Order number 15, where he designated, and people mistakenly say he designated 400,000 acres of land along the Atlantic coast. No, it was 5.3 million acres of land. And Kirsten Muller and I are working on a paper now where we're trying to correct the record on that. What's true about 400,000 acres is that's the amount of land that was settled by 40,000 of the freedmen before President Andrew Johnson, probably the worst president the United States ever had, although there are some competitors. Before Andrew Johnson stopped the program. So there was a commitment that was made. It was reversed by the president who succeeded Abraham Lincoln after his assassination. In addition, there were provisions in the first Freedmen's Bureau Act for the distribution of land to the formerly enslaved, and that was a legal commitment that was never executed. And so I think that there's strong documentation that such a commitment was made, and it was made as a contractual arrangement, but the contract was not met.
And thus the premise that it is a debt and not a charitable initiative, even though we are not just talking about enslavement, we're talking about the subsequent harms.
That's right. And you can have a debt that's attributable to the fact that you have committed an atrocity against a community, a grievous injustice, even if there was no prior contractual event that was violated. So, but in this case, we meet both conditions.
Dr. Darity, I've said a lot, and maybe I'm wrong. It sounds like you don't believe this from what I'm reading of your writing. I've said public opinion polls show that white folks don't support cash payments for reparations. And I've said that I don't care what public opinion polls say. If you owe me money, you owe me money. You got to pay it. It doesn't matter if it's popular or if you want to. But I think you make the case that we have to change public opinion in order to move Congress. And we're going to need Congress. We're going to need actually legislation to make this happen.
Yes, that's right. And there are some modest grounds for optimism, even though we're what I would view as a very dark moment.
Yeah.
But the honest grounds for optimism are based on some of the survey data that we have. In the year 2000, a study that was conducted by a couple of scholars at the University of Chicago, Michael Dawson and Ravana Popov, a survey that they conducted at the national level, they found that only 4% of white Americans endorsed monetary payments as reparations for Black Americans. By 2019 or so, that figure had risen to about 18%. And then in the aftermath of the George Floyd year, that figure actually rose by the beginning of January 2024, close to 30%.
Yeah, so that's which is pretty phenomenal in a short time.
That's fantastic. Over the course of 25 years, that's a major sea change in attitude. And so that opens the question as to whether or not that can continue, whether we can build on that base to develop the full range of support that's needed for a comprehensive reparations plan to be passed. I would argue that you probably do not necessarily need a majority of white Americans to support this to make reparations something that's politically feasible, but you do have to be in the vicinity of 45% of them. And that's the target. I must add, as a qualifier, that, of course, during the year in which Trump gets elected president, the degree of support for monetary payments as reparations has dropped off a bit. And so the percentage among whites is now closer to 24%.
Wow, that's sad. But, sea change can happen and does happen quickly sometimes. I used to talk about reparations with the late Dick Gregory back in the 1990s on the radio, and he always said that it was about normalization and people accepting it. And so it sounds like you agree with that, and so part of our job has to be talking about it and educating people and changing folks' perceptions and attitudes.
Yes, and helping people recognize that it is something that is normally and frequently done, and posing the question as to why it has never been done for Black American descendants of U.S. slavery.
Talking to Dr. William Darity, when we continue this conversation, I want to look at eligibility. You are very specific about this in your book, From Here to Equality, and it has been a bit of a controversy or stumbling block for some jurisdictions and some activist circles. We'll look at that next on a Freedmen Friday, KBLA Talk 1580.
More of First Things First with Dominic DePrima when we come forward.
For communities impacted by the war on drugs, cannabis legalization was supposed to create opportunity, but too often people entered the industry without the information they needed to succeed. That's why the Los Angeles County Office of Cannabis Management, in partnership with Life Development University, is presenting the Cannabis Worker Voices Panel on June 13th at 3 p.m. at Life Development University, located at 4241 Crenshaw Boulevard. Hear directly from cannabis workers about their career journeys, day-to-day experiences, challenges, and opportunities. Learn about workforce pathways, transferable skills, and what working in the legal cannabis industry really looks like. Free public education designed to help you make informed decisions before investing your time, money, or energy. Register today at lacountycannabised.org or call 323-747-6728.
Indeed presents hires you can't afford to get wrong, like nuclear reactor safety expert.
I disabled the backup cooling system. It was making such an annoying noise. You heard it, right? It was like,
We're on the countdown to core failure.
And you're saying we don't want that?
This is the job for sponsored jobs.
This is what happens when you don't sponsor your job on Indeed. Next time, get matched with quality candidates with Indeed sponsored jobs. Visit Indeed.com/hire now and sponsor your job today.
We're not for everybody, but we're for everybody. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580.
We're talking with Dr. William Darity. He's published or edited more than 13 books, published more than 300 articles in professional outlets, and The latest From Here to Equality, Reparations for Black Americans in the 21st Century is a must-read. So many of the things we talk about on these Freedmen Friday segments are outlined here. And I thought I knew about Callie House. I thought I knew about Queen Mother Moore. But when I read the book, I found out a lot of things that I did not know, which were very informative and interesting. So you go step by step, really, in helping us understand reparations, its history, and where we need to go, where you believe we need to go.
Yeah, yes, I think that was one of the other important objectives of the book, besides actually developing a plan.
So, a part of any plan has to be eligibility, and that's been a point of contention. You named two criteria. It seems like people say it's either lineage or its legacy, meaning ethnicity, and then there's some other theories that are somewhere in between. Harm, which seems similar to lineage. Talk to me about how you see the eligibility question. You mentioned 40 million Black Americans who would probably be eligible out of 47 million present in the country at this time.
Yes. So the 40 million that I have in mind would be individuals who would have to meet two standards. The first is what you've referred to already as a lineage standard. From the treatment that Kirsten Mullen and I pursue and From Here to Equality, we argue that the lineage standard has to be met by an individual demonstrating that they have at least one ancestor who was enslaved in the United States. But we also have a second condition, which we call the identity standard. And this means that an individual would have to show that for at least 12 years before the onset of a reparations plan or the adoption of a study commission for reparations, an individual would have had to have self-identified. Excuse me.
Bless you.
I'm sorry. Would have had to have self-identified as Black, Negro, African American, or Afro American. So we tie two conditions together. We tie a lineage standard and an identity standard together. The lineage standard exists because we want to make sure that the individuals who receive reparations have a direct connection to the history of chattel slavery in the United States. But also we have the identity standard because we know that there are individuals who are living as white who also have ancestral connections to individuals who were subjected to chattel slavery in the United States, and we don't think that they should be eligible for reparations. I will only add that the children of persons who meet those standards will also be eligible.
So is there a danger that identity standard could further this idea that lineage is a proxy for race and make this legally untenable?
Well, let me say this. In the development of the plan that we had in mind, we were trying to design what we viewed as an ideal plan, and we were not preempting ourselves by any kind of judicial judgments that might be made. But let me add that in the plan, one of the important steps is that any Congress that adopts a comprehensive reparations program must start with an acknowledgement of national responsibility for the harm. That, I believe, will meet at least the existing strict scrutiny standards that the court has. If the party that is making the act of restitution claims full responsibility for the conditions that justified the act of restitution, then that meets the strict scrutiny standard. And, unless, of course, the court alters the strict scrutiny standard, which they could do, since everything's for they do.
Especially
But,
this court, right?
Yeah. But we've also said that any Congress that was willing to commit itself to passing a reparations program also must be committed to stacking the court.
Do we need another Freedmen's Bureau? Do we need? Was the Freedmen's Bureau effective? Do we need another one? Should we have them at the state level? Should we have one at the federal level?
In our plan, we actually proposed that there should be a bureau that is responsible for executing and supervising the program. And if you wanted to call it a new Freedmen's Bureau, we'd be perfectly happy. We also think that there needs to be a body that monitors the effectiveness of the program, that consists of individuals who are elected by the eligible recipients of reparations.
And then finally, well, there's a million more questions, but with the time we have, wouldn't a federal reparations benefit everybody? I mean, it seems like a massive economic stimulus if measures are taken to avoid inflationary impact.
Well, I think that's a reason why we have not designed a plan where you are essentially taking money out of white pockets and transferring it to black pockets. We are trying to raise the black level of wealth so that it matches the average level that whites possess without extracting any existing wealth from white households. So, it's possible that there could be other beneficial effects. It may not be the case, but we don't think that that's a reason for not doing something that should have been done 160 years ago.
We've got 60 seconds here, Dr. Darity. What would you like to leave us with?
Just that this is a struggle, and we need to join and engage in it, and we need to engage in it even if the odds still appear to be long.
That's very well said. From Here to Equality, Reparations for Black Americans in the 21st Century does provide a blueprint, and you certainly shout out at the end a lot of folks who are doing just what you're talking about in the struggle, working on it, and you seem to be in support of many, many different iterations of activism around this.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for being part of our Freedmen Friday. If you missed this conversation or any of our previous editions, all you have to do is go on YouTube. They're all there, and you can find them wherever you find your podcasts. They're always free. They also live on our app, which is KBLA 1580 on the App Store and the Google Play Store. We're talking more money when we come forward. Maybe we'll unpack these tariffs. Maybe she'll have something to say about this conversation for reparations. Our brand new host on KBLA is joining me next after news, traffic, and sports. She's our new weekend host, Raquel Graham. That's next on KBLA Talk.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Bree Wood with BIN News Now. The opening of the Gordie Howe International Bridge has been delayed. Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan says the Detroit to Windsor span won't open as planned with no official reason given.
Michigan is ready to move forward, and we're hoping that we can do that in the next few days or weeks.
Reports suggest a delay may involve the Trump administration. A black woman in Alabama has been sentenced to life in prison in a fatal shooting. Prosecutors say Anaya Noden was convicted of killing another pregnant black woman, Justina Wallace, during a dispute in 2023. Wallace's unborn child also died, and the case involved a conflict between the two women who were pregnant by the same man. And nearly 1 in 3 Americans are avoiding checking their bank balances due to anxiety.